up, but today we're continuing a series called Guardrails. And here's how a guardrail is defined. It's defined this way. It's a system designed to keep vehicles from straying into dangerous or off-limit areas. That's kind of a technical way of saying, hey, when you go over a bridge, you kind of hope there's a guardrail there, right? I mean, like if you go over a bridge, I don't know if you've ever been over one that didn't have a guardrail, but it's quite the experience, right? If you've ever been in a road that needed a guardrail and didn't have it, you do notice it when you fly around that corner. You're thinking, oh my goodness, somebody could die here. So we're very grateful for guardrails in our lives. And here's what I know. I've never seen a person yet that complains about a guardrail when they hit it and they go, you know what, I wish that guardrail hadn't done in my car. I wish I just drove off the cliff, right? Or I wish I just drove off the bridge. Nobody says that. But in life, sometimes we need guardrails in our lives as well. And here's how we've defined it for personal guardrails, to say, hey, what if we had these in areas of our life? Has anybody ever drove off the cliff of life? You don't have to raise your hand, but I know who you are. God bless you. But that's okay if you have, but right, we go flying around the corner of life and we don't realize these are unsafe areas of life and we fly off those areas because we go, man, I wish that I had put a guardrail there. And so we've defined it this way, a personal standard of behavior that is a matter of conscience. A personal standard of behavior that's a matter of conscience. Now, what I want to make sure we understand is that as we've been discussing guardrails in this series, that guardrails are not necessarily black and white. They're put in gray areas. They're put in safe areas, meaning that this is where oftentimes society judges us because they go, well, putting a guardrail, that I'm free to go over on that area. That's true. But when you fly around certain areas of your own life, you realize that's dangerous and you don't want to fall off the cliff. So society or our culture baits us to the edge, and then when we fall off, what do? They ridicule us. Anybody ever been there? Where it's like, man, I thought everything was fine, and then when I fell off, nobody was there for me. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, we'll be there for you if you fall off the edge of life. That's what our church is all about. But how do we avoid continuing to just go off the cliff of life? And the way we do that is we establish some guardrails. And so we picked some areas, and if you haven't been here for the series, newbranch.net is our website. You can go back and listen to some of the other guardrails that we've established. And then last Sunday we talked about some guardrails for intimate relationships in our lives. We kind of started that saying, hey, for married people, for single people. And today we want to kind of continue that a little bit. We're going to get a little bit practical, and we're going to talk a little bit more about marriage and more from some personal experience. But I wanted to share one verse of scripture with you today, and it's this. Psalms 127 says this, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. That it takes God at the center and God's principles, and I really believe that he's talking about guardrails here to say as we follow godly principles, it can keep us safe. And so what I'd like to do and what's been on my heart to do is maybe a message that's a little bit different than what we've ever done before, because most of the time we're preaching through a text. And all the things that we're going to share today, I truly believe we can find in the scriptures, and I believe that. But they're found from some life experiences for me and my wife. And so my wife hates one thing more than everything else, and that's public speaking. So she never wants to do it, but she realizes this is just as important to do that. So I'd like to introduce my wife today. She's going to come and be with me today. My wife, my first lady in my life. I know you, you love this. Most beautiful woman I've ever met. Wait a minute, I'm not done yet. My ace. Right. I still had a little bit more. My ace.
I'm gonna cut you off.
My ace Boone Coon. That's my favorite saying for you.
Wow.
Marie Hunter. So anyway, there she is. So
Oh,
we're glad to have her.
Gosh. Well, thank you guys for letting me come and kind of share a little bit with you. And it seems only fair that I have my opportunity once in a blue moon. John likes to use a lot of stories about me as sermon illustrations, so I kind of thought it was good to be able to kind of set the record straight on a few things.
I'm concerned, but anyway, we say what happened in here stays in here, so y'all keep this stuff.
Yeah, of course it's online, so yeah, of course it stays right here.
She started. Okay, we're done with that. All right, so what we'd like to talk about today is this kind of our story, and our story went like this. In fact, we have a picture of us when people have been. Yeah, there you go.
When we were young, not gray, no wrinkles.
Oh yeah, and a lot of people when we first got married, when they come to our house, they used to say they would recognize Marie because Marie hasn't changed a lot, and they would look at them and they say, "Marie, were you married before?" I hated that, but anyway, so that happened. So what we want to talk to you today is kind of our story, and we really view it this way. and me and Marie talked about it, and we kind of said, hey, this is kind of the track that we took. It was a love story that turned into a nightmare that then turned into kind of the ultimate love story that's still continuing on. And we want to kind of, I guess my biggest concern for today is that we don't want to feel like, hey, we're on a pedestal or something like that, because those of you that know us best, you know we're not. But what we do think is that there's some guardrails that I believe that God has helped us establish in our lives that have really helped us, and we want to be able to share those things with you today, and hopefully that's helpful in your marriage. And also, not just for people that are married, there are several guardrails that apply even if you're not married or not, but especially for married people today. So our personal guardrails that have really changed our lives, that's what we want to share with you today. And so first, before we go there, we just want to kind of share our story a little bit. You guys have heard my perspective, and so I thought I would let Marie share our story a little bit today about, I don't know how you fell in love with me. And
I don't know what I was thinking.
Awesome,
a Redskins fan. Oh, I don't know. Crazy.
I don't want to talk about that.
Well, I have to go way back in time. As you can see, it'll be 22 years in January, so got to go way back. So I was young. I had just graduated high school, 18 years old, and believe it or not, my mother actually hooked me up with him. I had dated the same boy throughout high school, and we had broke up, and I was kind of looking to be a free agent for a while. But my mom had met this boy at church and thought he was a great guy, wanted me to meet him. So I was like, whatever, fine, sure. We met at church, and I was like, he's kind of cute. I think I'm cool. I'll go out with him. And that's how it started. We went on one date, and I saw him every day after that, and he proposed after 1 month. I don't know. I'm crazy. I said yes. We were married after 4 months of our first date. I'm not advising that for anybody, but hey, it worked for us. So it was definitely a whirlwind romance. We did everything kind of a little bit crazy and unconventional. So after our first anniversary, not long after that, I was pregnant and expecting, kind of a surprise. But hey, it was a good surprise. Why
after our first anniversary?
Yeah, let me preface for all of those that thought maybe it was that shotgun wedding. And no. So we were expecting a baby in year 2. And of course, what do you have to do? You got a baby, you got somewhere you got to put it. So of course, we had to buy a house. So you get married, you have a baby, you buy a house. This is what you do. So, and that kind of was exciting, but we ended up some places maybe we didn't want to go.
Yeah, so she said she would cover the love part, and then she wanted me to cover kind of the nightmare part, which is fine. But one thing she did when we first got together, which maybe is a good guardrail for some people that are single, is Marie was the first one I ever dated that said, I was dating quite a few people then because I was 22 and she was 18. I didn't know she was 18 at the time. I thought she was older. But she was 18, so that was good. But what she said on the first date, and I never had anybody say that to me before, she said, look, if you date me, you can't date anybody else. And when I started dating Marie, I was kind of like, what? But it was awesome. And after I went out with Marie, I never went out with anybody else. It was absolutely awesome. So that was a really good guardrail. But yeah, everything she said is accurate. I mean, we fell in love. It was an absolute whirlwind. We were also very impulsive, which in some ways is good. Going, hey, when you're in love, you do a lot of things. Hey, if you're waiting for everything to be perfect, that's probably not good. And so getting married early was awesome for us. We didn't care. We lived in a cheap apartment when we first got married, low-income apartments, and we were just as happy there as anywhere else. And so it was never about money or any of those kinds of things for us. But then when Marie got pregnant, we started to think, hey, we probably need to do what everybody does. We buy a house. And because impulsiveness had worked out for us before, we kind of thought, hey, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Hey, we'll just buy a house. The bank said we can afford it. We started to buy a house. And whenever we didn't really communicate a lot. We just kind of made decisions. I don't know if anybody has ever done that. And we just thought, hey, it'll all work out. That's kind of how we thought. And that's kind of where the verse came that maybe you thought we were using that from life experience. But for us, the verse was, hey, the prudent man sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. That's a life verse for our marriage. And what happened is we would see the danger, and then we would think a false hope that would be, hey, we'll just keep going and eventually it'll work out. And so that's how we discovered Visa and MasterCard and American Depressed and all those, Discover bondage and all these kinds of things. And so we learned all those things together, but unfortunately it was, hey, we just kept thinking, hey, everything will work out until finally we reached kind of a crisis point. And I'll say, it wasn't intentional. It was more, hey, it was a great story. Everything was working great. And when we found out about Wyatt, it was a surprise, but it was a great surprise. And so we were super excited about having a baby. We didn't know what we were doing. We were scared and excited all at the same time. And so we bought a house, we get into it, and every time we had a debt, then we would just cover it with credit. And it started to cause a crisis in our lives. And unfortunately, one of the things that happened for us was we had gotten involved in church, which was great, but we were at community church, and there's a new service that started called High Tide. It was for 20 to 30-somethings. Now we're all 40 to 50-somethings, which is kind of funny because we ran into everybody the other day with them, and we're all like mid-40s and upper 50s and those kinds of things now. But we were young adults then, and it was a really cool movement. I didn't start it. Dale Saul started it, and I came alongside him, and I was the first community group leader there, and I was going to be an associate pastor there, and everything was great. But because of that, you're kind of on a pedestal. So I kind of thought I didn't share the things that were going on in my life. It's kind of like, hey, I don't need help. I just kind of keep going, and everything seems to work out. And then we hit a crisis point. When Marie had Wyatt, the pregnancy went great. But then when she actually had the birth of Wyatt, some really tough stuff happened, and I'll let her kind of tell you about that.
Yeah, the pregnancy was wonderful, great, and I was very excited. The birth, not so much. That did not go well for me. I was very sick. It was very traumatic. So Wyatt, it's on you. But my past was I had suffered some very severe sexual abuse growing up. And I did not know that throughout that birth process, all of those things, it kind of shook up that box of things that had been buried deep inside of me. So I thought, hey, I'm just having a kid like everybody else. But I started having a lot of just things I'd never experienced before. I was really depressed. I was struggling to get out of bed, to be functional. And of course, we're in church, we're active. I don't want to share that with anybody. I don't want to share it with John. I want to be the good wife. And so I kind of kept all that stuff inside. I started having a lot of anxiety and panic attacks, and I just didn't know what to do about it. So I turned to my old friend and started drinking again and, be at home all day. And Wyatt, poor thing, had to kind of fend for himself. And, 10 minutes before John walks in the door, I'm running around like a mad woman trying to clean and look like somehow I've been productive and, being some kind of productive person in society when really, all I felt like doing was just dying. And one night we came home from a meeting and it wasn't going to go well. So I walked into my kitchen and ants had gotten into all of my cereal and all through my cupboards. And I don't know what happened. It literally was just more than I could manage, and I lost it. I stood in my kitchen for probably 2 hours, screaming, cursing, going crazy. John, God bless him, was like, oh my Lord, what has happened to my wife? And they just stood out there. There was actually other family members at the house. I threw everything out of my cupboards onto the floor. Seriously, dumping cereal boxes. Just everywhere. I literally just had a total meltdown. And after that was over, I calmly walked out of my kitchen. I looked at John and I said, I can't do it anymore. Every day you leave the house, all I want to do is just kill myself, and I can't do it. And I quit everything, and I walked into my bedroom, and I got in my bed, and I did not get back out for actually years, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a pretty big nightmare.
So yeah, that hit a crisis point in our life. A lot of stuff was going on behind the scenes, and up till then, it was like we almost had two different worlds. It was like one world was our private crisis that we kept ignoring and thinking it was going to get better, but keep going, And so it wasn't that we thought our lives were falling apart. It really felt like our lives fell apart in a moment, but they really didn't. And I think a big piece of it was for us, and as we talked through for us, we went, hey, the series Guardrails comes from North Point Community Church, which is Andy Stanley's church, and they let us use it. But the one piece that we're probably not using is the points from North Point, because our guardrails might be a little different than them, and it's customizable. So what we wanted to share is some things that happen in our lives. Our two worlds collided, our private world of crisis and our public world, which we had a pretty good mask. I mean, we were community group leaders. We had all kinds of stuff going on. We were actually at another church by that point at Believers, and we were helping with small group ministries of all things. And here we were at the biggest crisis point in our lives, and now we had to face, now people know. And I got to tell you, that was probably the worst part of it, was going, hey, not only was these things going on, but now everybody knows. And we had gotten to the place where financially, Marie couldn't work at that time, but we hadn't planned. And so we were living on the edge, and now it pushed us over the edge, and we were no longer able to make our bills and pay for things. And I didn't know what we were going to do. We were at, that was probably the biggest crisis point in our entire lives. And so what I'd like to share next is how that got turned around in our lives. And I'd like to do that through talking about some guardrails that we established. Now understand, these guardrails took time. They didn't just happen overnight. They probably took closer to a decade, because that was year 5 in our lives. Wyatt was probably around 2, and we had been married for 5 years. And all of a sudden, our world just got smashed. And we didn't know how we were going to make it. Because here's the thing. Up until then, we thought, hey, we're just living on love. No plan, just living on love. And we found, hey, that's not enough. You do have to have a plan. You do have to have God at the center of your marriage, but also godly principles. And what we learned was this, is that you have to establish some guardrails. And we'd like to share some of those with you today. So the first one is this. The first guardrail that we found that's so important is this, is not doing it alone, but getting counsel. I know you probably thought, because I've preached on this so many times, maybe you thought that this wasn't personal. The reason why I'm so about this, and I think this is so much what church is about, is because it was such a big deal for us. Now, as an associate pastor, I had lots of people around me. I sat in rows all the time. In fact, I was good at rows. In fact, I was good at being up on stage. I'd been up on stage a lot. But I wasn't good at letting people know what was inside. And when I say getting counsel, it was, hey, not just, I'll let Marie tell you about, professional counseling, which is a big piece of it, but also just counsel like, does anybody know what's going on? And the honest truth was no, they didn't. They had no idea my finances were in the shape they were in. They had no idea that we were facing certain things. We had no idea how to communicate to each other. And we were trying to do all this and figure it out all by ourselves. And what we learned is you got to move from rows in churches to circles. Does that sound familiar? And so we had to learn that, hey, how do you do that? And so for me, I kind of went first in it because Marie was at that point really upset and really messed up. And I realized I've got to make some tough choices, and I don't know how to make them. I don't even know. There's no good choices left. All my silver bullets are gone. And so I went to a meeting at Believers at the time it was called Crown Financial Counseling. And I went there to find somebody that I could say, I'm in a crisis and I don't know what to do with my budget because I'm about to file bankruptcy and have my house foreclosed on, and I don't know what to do. And sad part was I work for a bank, so that's even sadder. But anyway, so it goes to show you can know all the right things, but behavior is a whole different issue. And so I went there knowing, I already knew what the track was, and I was like, I don't have anything left. I don't know what to do. And for the first time, I called the guy that was doing the class, and he said, I'll meet with you. And he sat down. I don't know if he knew what he was getting into. And he sat down, and he said, I really feel like you probably just need to tell me what's going on. And he sat there, and he just listened. The first night, he didn't say anything. And for the first time in my life, I really just kind of took off the mask, and I said, it's the scariest thing in the world for me. I opened up and said, this is what's really going on in my life. And that was really a pivot point for us. I mean, it was a pivot point for our finances, but more than that, of going, hey, in areas where you're weak, don't just keep going. The psalmist says, hey, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. And I never got that part. I didn't have an inner circle. I had me, and my weaknesses were being exploited, and it was very, very difficult. But we found that, hey, this was probably one of the most important parts, and I'll let Marie tell you about her counseling experience.
Yeah, growing up as a Christian and Christian community, getting mental health treatment is kind of taboo. And so for me, that was kind of a struggle. I think that's why I didn't ask for help. I thought, well, Christians should be able to pray and, pull it together. But that's really not true. And thankfully, God has gifted a lot of amazing men and women who are great counselors, great psychiatrists. amazing people who love the Lord and are gifted by Him to be able to meet with someone like me and help us get on the road to healing and to get what we need. And I mean, I can't say enough how I'm a pastor's wife today. God can still use you. Just because I have PTSD doesn't mean God's done with me yet. He left me here for a reason. So just to get that kind of help, as scary as it was and as ashamed as I felt, God has used that in my life to see how important it is. And there is nothing better than accepting the help that the Lord has offered, even if it doesn't come in the package you wished it came in. So,
that's good. I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, for us, I mean, counseling was a big deal, and for me as well. And so I think, hey, if you're having somebody go through that, don't think that both people don't need it, because you do. I didn't realize that in my life. I was kind of prideful. Oh, I give counsel. I don't need counsel. And I learned, hey, I was just as messed up, if not more so, and I was adding to a lot of problems as well. And so we both went to get counseling because we're at the end of our rope. We didn't know what to do, and it helped more than I could ever tell you. And so, if you need help with that, let us know, because we'd love to direct you to some really good people. It took a long process. And one thing I want to tell you is that, and I think Marie would agree with this didn't happen overnight. Just so you know, like we're saying it in little sound bites, but just so you know, I mean, that was year 5. It took about 10 years to get it all straight and find the right people and do the right thing. So it's not a slow process whatsoever. But
even more than that, I still actually see a counselor on a regular basis to make sure that I'm always staying on top and being at the best place I can be, because God has a lot of things for me to do, and I need to be at my healthiest to do that. So
that's right.
You've got to stay on top of it.
Yep. Doesn't end. There's a lot of things we face, and I see the same counselor with Marie, so it's been really an awesome journey for us. So don't try to do it alone. That's one guardrail for us, is that we learn, hey, we need other people in our lives. We never want to go back to it. We have small groups in our lives. We have pastor groups in our lives. We make sure we have a lot of accountability, a lot of encouragement, because we need those things in our lives. So that's the first guardrail that I would see. The second one is this. It's loving your spouse how they're made, not just how you're made. I thought, by year 5, here's what we had, and I don't take anything away from this. When we met, we fell in love. So, man, I knew this person, right? I mean, we spent hours talking to each other. But what we learned over time is that while opposites attract, because we are opposite, and which is awesome. I mean, and all the things that we just loved about each other and we thought was great. By year 5, what happens is opposites attract, and then they attack. I don't know if you knew that, but that's kind of how it goes. And a lot of things we just thought, hey, they're cool at first, but you're thinking through the lens, and you really mean well. And I just remember going, hey, I really think I know Marie the best way I could possibly do, and I had no idea there were certain things that I was doing, and honestly that she was doing as well, that we didn't feel comfortable sharing. We didn't have honest communication, honestly. We just thought, hey, we love each other, and then we just overlooked certain things, and then they kind of came to a head. And I remember one thing in particular that I found out later was we, at Believers, we were the head of small group ministries, and so we had brought the church together. There was about 300 people at this meeting, and I asked Marie to speak with me about how to train them on, it was like a training event, and I was leading it, and Marie was going to do a small part in it, which I didn't realize she was scared of public speaking at the time, because she was pretty good at it, and she was, and then I did something. Anyway, I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, this is just really enjoyable. 300 people in a room. It happened to actually fall on my birthday that night, and John.
That was date night.
Yeah, that was his idea of date night, not my idea of date night. John, being the supportive and loving husband he is, as he is passing the conversation and the training over to me, he has the entire audience sing me happy birthday. Anyone who's introverted knows I don't like people to sing me happy birthday and my cake in the privacy of my own home, much less a restaurant, and certainly not in front of 300 people. It feels like a very, very long song as you're staring at everybody. And then I still had to speak after that, which was great. I made it. I survived. I didn't think I was at the time, but I did make it. And of course, being the sweet wife I was, I just kept that to myself, that was a total nightmare.
Yeah, until we came across a book. We were doing a book after kind of our world fell apart. We did a book together. I had just read a business book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And then he wrote another book that I thought was just repackaged, and I happened to have it. Somebody gave it to me. It's called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And I just thought, hey, that's just a book repackaged, not a big deal. But I was going through it, and I said, hey, why don't we take a test? And what I really meant was I thought that it was about, hey, how well do you know your spouse? And I thought, I know her great. I mean, I think I'm really a great husband. So I was taking it more for her to say how great I was. And so we went through it, and we were listing emotional deposits, which are basically things you do in your life that add value to that person and build them up, and that they really get energy from that. And then emotional withdrawals, that they're not things that, I mean, you do have to do some things that are withdrawals, but the things that are withdrawals, they kind of bring you down. And I thought, well, I don't think I have any of those, right? And so we take the test, and right in the middle of that test was, hey, when you did that at Believers, I was really offended. That really hurt me. I hated that you did that. I hated you for doing that. And I was dumbfounded. I mean, that was the first time I realized in my life, because I was like, but that's what I would have liked, right? I like being the center of attention. I like all the attention. I like you making over me. I like you doing those things. And that was the first time I opened my eyes to, she's not made like me, and that's okay. But I had to learn how to love her the way she's made, not just how I'm made. And I realized I'm spending a lot of effort and energy. In fact, at that point, I was planning a surprise party for her. We didn't do that, and she wouldn't have been grateful. I said, so you wouldn't have liked that. And I would have done a lot of work for something that she would have hated, thinking that I'm doing something great, but becoming a student of her, learning, hey, I've got to love her how she's made, not just how I am. And realizing that an introvert, especially one that's had sexual abuse in their past, feels very guilty all the time for being introverted. That, hey, I can't do social things all the time. And once I understood it, you know what I could do? I could say, well, no problem. How often can you do it? You know, what can you do? What can you do? You know, and we learned each other, and she had to learn about me too. She pulled some things out of me because there was things that I needed that she didn't realize. Like things like Marie likes to stay at home all the time. I don't. I like to go all the time. And sometimes I need to get away just to unwind, and she started to realize that and say, hey, even though that's not important to me, she would do it for me to go, hey, let me help you get away, and she would enjoy it, but it wasn't necessarily what built her up. So we kind of learned each other, and I think 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families helped us. 5 Love Languages, if you ever read that, was a big deal. And loving the other person how you're made, not just how they are, was a big deal for us, and learning how to have honest dialogue. Did you want to add anything to that? Or? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right, so number 3 goes right along with it. It doesn't just happen. It takes communication and intentionality. And then probably one of the biggest tools that we've ever had in our lives that has helped us more than anything else is having a family meeting. And we'll tell you what that is in just a minute. So you know, when you first get married, you fall in love the way we did. You can't imagine anything else because you're really like Bambi, Twitter-pated, you know, and you're just, you know, you're living on a cloud, you know. So those people, hey, get a room, stop doing this in a movie theater kind of thing. And that was us. I mean, but you think it's so awesome, nobody else does. But you think it is because it's just like this person is just awesome. And so you just think, oh, that's the way the rest of our lives are going to be. We're going to live happily ever after, and it's, you know, it's not going to take planning, it's not going to take communication because we already have all that. We just have love. We're going to live on love. And then what happens? Then pressures of life comes, and bills in life come, and babies come. They mess up everything, don't they? I mean, I'm just playing. You didn't. And so then all of a sudden it took some intentionality in which we didn't have, and we didn't know how to do those things, and we had to learn how to communicate with each other, and that takes effort. It takes cultivation, just like a garden. And one thing that popped up was, well, anyway, I'll let Marie share how different we were and how much we didn't communicate.
Family meetings are just really important, at least for our family. I think for a lot of people it could really help because a lot of times you say things and you just say them at the wrong time. So one story that kind of came to my mind as we were talking about this was we lived in a townhouse at the time, so we had a stairwell. And, you know, it's that time, the air filters needed to be changed. I was like, hey, babe, you know, can you change the air filters? Sure. All right, couple days go by, no air filters being changed. Hey, babe, remember you said, you know, you're going to get to the air filters? Yeah, I'm going to take care of that. Still nothing. So I'm smart. So the air return was right above at the top of the stairway. So I put the air filter right there. Like literally you have to stare at the air filter all the way up the stairs and pass by it. I'm thinking for sure, like, hello, you know. Still nothing. I'm like, I'm starting to get a little bit irritated. You know, I'm like, what? I mean, are you mocking me just walking by the air filter? Come on. So I'm like, whatever, fine, I'll be resourceful. I'm changing it myself. So I pulled the office chair out of our little office, which happens to be a rolly chair. And I pull it out. I'm on top of the chair at the top of the stairs, and he happens to walk by. He's like, Marie, what are you doing? You're going to kill yourself. I would have been happy to do that for you. I was like, oh, my Lord, somebody is going down the stairway. I do not know what, but I said, till death do us part, and somebody's dying, because I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And it just was literally, when I would ask him, it would just be, hey, you're coming in from work, and it's, just in this passing moment of, hey, can you take care of it? And he meant to, but it wasn't at a good time. It was not ending up on that to-do list. And believe me, as soon as he said that, it went right out of his mind, and that was kind of frustrating. So family meetings help kind of with some of that.
So the way we came up in 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families by Stephen Covey, that's why I recommend the book. It did describe having family meetings. In fact, when we first read that, we thought, that's so stupid. We didn't think it was really, that's how we've usually started everything. Yeah, Lamaze was, anyway, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, don't talk about that.
We got kicked out of the class.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's
we were
John's
very
fault.
immature. Yeah, it was, but anyway, it didn't help. But okay, so, but what we learned about the family meeting thing was, and this is what brought our attention, I think, here, and what she didn't mention is her dad's a sailor. He's in the Navy, and so she had a lot of colorful language. She learned a lot of language from him. So a lot of times what would happen is that when we went to having these conversations, there would be a lot of anger. So in other words, hey, I'm fed up, and now I'm coming to you, and it wasn't necessarily the idea was wrong, but the way it was presented was blah, right? And then the other person, what do? We fire back, and now all of a sudden we're arguing about something that isn't even the issue at hand, and now it builds up and builds up, and we start saying things we don't mean and using language that we don't want to talk about here today, but you get the idea. You know who you are. And, and then what happens? You go, oh, man, we don't want to talk like that to each other, so what do you say? I'm sorry. But guess what the problem is? We're sorry and we make up, but the problem's still there. And so what do? We go, we never want to talk about that again if this is what happens when we talk, right? And what we learned we are talking at the wrong time. We do not have a mechanism by which to communicate. That's why I say it doesn't just happen naturally, because men are made a certain way and women are made a certain way, and we don't hear the same things. We just don't. We're not wired that way. And so what happens is what do? We wait till it builds up, then we go to talk to our spouse. Anybody think that's going to go well? I can tell you. We got video. No, I'm just playing. No, we don't. Thank God. Thank God we don't. We didn't have that. And we didn't have Facebook then either. Thank the Lord. But what happens? We go, hey, how do we do that? And so what happened with the family meeting, and I think it was the most, when we apply the scriptures about just about everything it talks about, from conflict resolution to communicating properly and godly, the family meeting was probably the thing that changed our lives the most. And it takes about 30 minutes to an hour a week. If I were to tell you, you could take 30 minutes to an hour of your week and it would cut out 90% of your arguments, you might not believe me, but it did. And it changed our lives completely. Because what happened? Now we had a scheduled meeting at a time that we picked that was healthy, that we were able to get together on our finances, on our schedules, on the most important things. That's all we want to talk about. Not a summit, just some bullet points to say what's important. And I'll let Marie tell you what happened when we started doing a family meeting with the air filters.
They got changed, believe it or not. It's a miracle. Because it actually would get on his list, and he would take care of it. We could talk about our schedules. It's amazing how many arguments we could have over just literally a schedule. Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to be there. Oh, well, I told you, whatever. And, just so many miscommunications over that. And, like you said, I'm introverted. So if you have me gone every night of the week, expect for me to crash and burn by the weekend. So we were able to really be strategic about getting on the same page about our schedule. And really, I'm serious, 90% of the arguments and those little frustrations that build up, in a home was really alleviated because we could talk about it at a time we weren't emotional. even when we talked about things that might be something that was frustrating, it was at a down time. So it's a pretty useful tool.
Yeah. And the 10% of arguments we still have, we just like them because we like to argue, so it's kind of fun. It causes sparks anyways. Hey, you get the idea. So it keeps us alive. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm sure we can demonstrate later. But family meetings changed our lives. I mean, it cut out so much as we learned how to communicate with each other. The other thing that it did for us was this. It made things measurable. Because what we learned in business, most of us apply. If you're in leadership or you're in business, you understand if you can't define the win, you can't win, right? And too many of us, we don't have that in our marriages. What we have is oh, it's just going to happen. Oh, it's just a feeling. You got two people that feel completely different and look at the world completely different. How many people think you're going to win? You're not, because you never did it. We need more time together. That's the number one thing people say. How much? You've never defined it. That's what a family meeting is for. You can define how much. That way, you can come back. And what cut out arguments is we could come back. You don't spend enough time, and then what happens, you look at the calendar and you go, oh, man, we did schedule date night. We did keep it. Or we could look at it and we're not mad at each other. We just go, man, for this season, we weren't able to do it, but let's not turn that into a season. So you got something measurable to come back to. Sometimes it was even, you just don't spend enough time, but we did. But it was just kind of the thought. It was the inception that you never do. So it's always that. But now you have something that goes, well, wait a minute, but we are. Oh, yeah, no, we are. And then it helps that other person go, yeah, we are spending time together. That's awesome. And then now they start feeling positive about the person because it's measurable. And so I recommend it more than anything else. I think it could change marriages. It could change lives. Come together. Find a time that both of you guys can meet. It's worth it. It could change. It could really seriously change your life forever. Did you have anything you want to add to that? Or? Okay. So the final one is this, come what may. And the way we came up with this one is when we were going through a hard time in our life, there was a very godly movie with a really great song called this. The movie was called Moulin Rouge, if you've seen it. Great theologians.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real godly movie.
Very godly movie.
And there's a song in it that says, come what may, I'll always love you. Anyway, it's kind of a song that meant a lot to us. And what it means is this, is that there comes a time in your life where you have to decide, whatever happens, we're going to make it, period. Come what may. And I remember where it came from, and it came from something that happened with Marie. When Marie went through and she started having flashbacks and remembering some of the things that happened to her, it was a very dark, dark time in our lives. And they asked me to see a counselor as well. I was very resistant, but I did go. And the guy recommended a book to me called Allies in Healing. It's not necessarily a Christian book, but it had a very Christian principle in it. One principle that I took. I remember a lot of things. And what it did was it took, for the person that's not the sexual abuse victim, it took the spouse and it said, hey, here's what's going to happen. And it was pretty good, in fact, more than what happened in the book, because you couldn't believe that these are the things that were going to happen, or this is what that person faces in their life. And I remember reading that book, and I was just sitting there, and then at the very end of it, it said, here's all the things, and they spelled it out, in explicit terms for you. And then it said, now, you got a choice to make, and I don't want you, and they said, don't make it quick, because here's the problem. You're going to want to go, oh, no, I love that person. Oh, yeah, I'm going to commit to that person. And they said, don't do that. Your job right now is not to commit. Your job is to make sure that you're willing to commit. Because if you're not, you're going to be another person that disappoints them along the path. And this is going to be hard. Don't miss out on this. This is going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your entire life. But if you're willing to do it, then commit no matter what. Make sure you know what you're committing to. And we made a decision, both me and Marie, because to be honest with you, hers was even harder to go, hey, a person like her that could trust another human being was very difficult. And the most beautiful part about life to us, there's a lot of difficult things, but the one thing that I know is this, is that there's nothing like having somebody love you no matter what. And so I think the challenge from us today would be this, is that some of you guys might be right on the brink and you realize, hey, life is hard. By the way, it's not just sexual abuse. I really believe it's marriage advice. And the marriage advice is this, come what may. If you're willing to love the person like that, yes, all the feelings and the romantic stuff and all the feelings and all that, that's all great. But there's something that supersedes all of it if you're willing to love a person no matter what. And I know some of you guys, you've had marriages that have wrecked. I'm not talking to you. I'm not here to make you feel guilty about that. But now you've moved on to another relationship, and it's time to say, hey, maybe it's time to commit no matter what happens in our lives, that God can help us. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. And I believe that God can build your house come what may. I don't know if you wanted to add anything with that.
Yeah, I think for me in our relationship, that's kind of the foundation is, for me, I couldn't trust. I had a really hard time with that. I think that's why I couldn't be honest and open. And for John to have made that commitment to walk that out, for me to see somebody who was always there, he proved that he would love me and be there come what may, because it was ugly. I mean, I wasn't very lovable. It was a really hard time. We had to make a lot of sacrifices. He made a lot of sacrifices. And, to have that from somebody in my perspective is amazing, because now I have somebody that I know I can trust him no matter what. I know he'll be here no matter how ugly it gets, no matter what state I'm in. There is nothing that can happen on this planet that is going to make John leave my side. And, I think hopefully he feels the same way. For me, it was a little bit of a different story. I had to commit to actually living. I was in the psych ward literally going, God, I was a Christian. I didn't know Christians could feel like that, and just go, I don't think I can do this. It's too hard. It's too big. And I know you're God, but I don't see how I can go forward. And I remember I was listening to some Christian songs, and I remember sitting there on the floor in the psych ward going, God telling me I have to decide. Either you're going to give it everything and fight to live, or just go now. And I had to decide if it was really worth living. And I decided that I love my husband. I love my son. I wanted to live. And that took me saying, I will do whatever I have to do. I will go wherever I have to go. I will take any meds I need to take. I will get any help from anywhere I need to get help. And I will commit to whatever process God has for me so that I can live. And I think hopefully for John, he saw that I was willing to fight to live, to fight to be here with my family, to be healthy.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks.
God did that.
Thank you very much. So, I guess what we'd like to say is this: is one, the journey for us is not over, and you guys are a big part of it. We're not alone. That's a big part for us, and I think the same thing is true for you guys. So what we wanted to do was, in no way are we up on a pedestal. No way have we arrived. It's not that you've learned it. You're learning it, and we're learning it together. And so there's many more challenges that we face. But here's what I know: God has established these guardrails in our lives, and we just wanted to share them with you guys. And hopefully they're helpful to you. That's the reason why we wanted to do it. And I really appreciate you being willing to do it, because I know that's a big deal. And so here's what I'd like to do to close today. I'm going to have Marie, if we could stand, we'd just like to pray for you guys today. And I'm going to have Marie pray for you.
Lord, I just thank you of how amazing you are, Lord, that you can look down on us and you actually love and care for us. And Father, there's a lot of us that are hurting, that have didn't have guardrails in place, that have went flinging off the cliff, Lord. But there's hope in you. You have a path. You have a plan, and even in those darkest hours, Lord, you will be there. And Father, for those of us that maybe need to put some guardrails in place, I pray that you would give us wisdom, give us guidance. Let us be open to seeing what those are, and to be obedient to put in place what needs to be put in place, so that we can bring honor and glory to you, Lord. That's really all we want to do, and I'm just grateful. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my story and what you've done for me, because, Lord, without you, I wouldn't be here. And I'm so, so grateful that you can still use somebody who's broken, and you can make us whole again. So, Father, be with us today as we go from here in about our weeks, Lord. And Father, we just give you all praise and honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.